Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Why don't you come up sometime, see me?
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Hey everybody, Kirk here. I just want to say before we start the episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter.
And Facebook.
And if you enjoy the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and a comment on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We love to hear your feedback, and you can find us on any social media by searching Silver Screen Time Machine.
We appreciate your feedback. Look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, welcome to Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy and Kirk's classic film review. Hi, Kirk.
Hi, Wendy. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited for our pilot episode here.
Me too. And so what have we decided to do on our pilot episode?
Okay, a movie we picked for today, we're going back to 1937 and Stage Door.
Stage Door.
Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers. Had you ever seen this movie before?
I had seen this movie before, but it was very nice to actually review it because I had forgotten how wonderful this film actually is.
This is my first time watch. I had this on my list because I was trying to get through a lot more Katharine Hepburn, and this is one I had wanted to watch for a while. So when we decided what to do for our first episode, I said, hey, let's check this off my list. Two birds with one stone. So I'm really glad we got to watch it. I think there's a lot of meat on the bone here to talk about today.
Absolutely. So not only Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers, we have an all-star cast here. I mean, we have Lucille Ball in a very early role playing Judith Canfield. We have Gail Patrick, who was a pretty frequent actress in the 1930s. And what I think is really cool is that we have Ann Miller, and Ann Miller plays a small role as Ginger Rogers' dancing partner in this particular film. Fun fact about Ann Miller, she was 14 years old.
Yeah, I read that. That is
Can
crazy.
you believe that?
I had no idea when I first started watching the movie, and I read that later. And I mean, there's always that thing where you look at people from that time period, they always look a little older.
Yeah, but
that's ridiculous.
She looks much older than
14 is crazy.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if she was even going to get the part. And Ginger Rogers actually helped her because the director, Gregory LaCava, brought her in with Ginger and thought she was too tall because she was taller than Ginger.
Sure.
And so she came in and she made this plea to Ginger and said, oh, I could wear flat shoes, you wear heels, you wear a high hat, I'll wear a low hat. And Ginger said, stand up, string bean. And she stood up and she said, let the kid do the part.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
And they became great friends. They were friends for their entire lives.
Oh, wow. And I know Lucille Ball, too, specifically, I think this movie in a lot of ways reflects her life because she was that workhorse kind of actress. She didn't have instant success in her career either. She put the work in. She was the background actress. She was the contract worker. She showed up when whenever they needed a part, they needed a redhead, they needed somebody her size. She showed up and did the work. And she, I was watching some interviews with her and she was saying, I sat back and I watched and I studied and I didn't complain and I learned from everybody. And that's eventually she got there. But she had a lot of times in her life that were similar to what she was going through in this movie.
Yeah, and when you see her in this film, in this role, she doesn't look like the Lucille Ball that we expect to see, like when she becomes I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball. She looks different. I mean, you can still tell it's her, but she looks different. And I think another thing to note about the cast here, since we're talking about the cast, all these great actresses, but one person was nominated for an Academy Award, no big name actress. It was Andrea Leeds, who plays the role of Kay Hamilton, was nominated for the Academy Award in this film.
And yeah, that makes the most sense because I feel like as good as everybody else is, I think she has the weightiest role, the heaviest role. I think she does a lot of the heavy lifting story-wise. I think she has those Oscar reel kind of moments where most of the other actresses are having those like back and forth, those quippy moments. And they're fun, but they're not the kind of stuff you get nominated for. So it makes sense that was the Oscar nomination for this one.
Yeah, and it's nice that she did get nominated because she didn't really make very many movies after that. I mean, she made a handful of movies. She wound up getting married and giving up acting to raise a family. But fun fact, she was considered for the role of Melanie in Gone with the Wind,
oh, really?
Which I think is significant because if you look at her, she does have kind of a passing resemblance to Olivia de Havilland.
Sure.
So I think that's an interesting point. As far as Academy Awards, this film was nominated for 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, Screenplay, and Best Actress. I would like to dig into the writing of the screenplay.
Sure.
Obviously, this film based on a play, as many films were in the 1930s, but not similar at all to the play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of changes. I believe, if I understand right, now obviously I've never seen the play, never read it, but I understand that the play was actually more focused on Hollywood and more critical of Hollywood. And ironically, once it went to Hollywood, it became more taking shots at Broadway and the stage and those kind of things. So it was very different. I understand the Ginger Rogers' role was very different. Like she had a lot less, I guess you'd call it stage time instead of screen time. But her character was talked about more than she actually appeared in the play.
Yeah, Katharine Hepburn's character too. They sort of built that role up for Katharine Hepburn. The screenwriters were Maury Riskin and Anthony Vaylor. Just some interesting stuff about them. Maury Riskin, he had also collaborated with director Gregory LaCava on My Man Godfrey, which is a wonderful screwball comedy. Maury Riskin, I thought was very interesting, is he did the screenplay writing for many of the Marx Brothers movies.
Oh, wow.
So obviously he knew humor. I
Absolutely.
mean, some of the movies he did, specifically A Night at the Opera and Animal Crackers, which are some of the Marx Brothers' best in my opinion. Now, Anthony Vaylor, a little different. He did some comedies early, but then he would wind up working on very serious films, film noirs like The Stranger, The Killers, and The Night of the Iguana. So it kind of went a different way there.
And that makes a lot of sense because you have both those aspects in this movie. There's a lot of lighthearted humor, a lot of funny scenes, a lot of comedy, but at heart, it's kind of dark. We'll talk about that when we get in the plot a little bit more, but there are some really dark, bleak moments in this movie, so it makes sense you have kind of both sides of that coin working on the script.
This is a film great to watch because of the witty dialogue between the girls in the boarding house. And a lot of that dialogue wasn't even gotten from the play or from the script writers.
Yeah, they actually brought the cast together, all the women together, and the director basically had a script girl sit and
spy on them.
and write, just let them talk and let them riff, and then wrote down everything they said, and all the best stuff was incorporated into the script.
Yeah, and they just pretty much talked to each other that way, just very sarcastically, that kind of sarcastic, My Girl Friday, witty
repartee.
Repartee, yes.
Zingers, a lot of one-liners,
yes.
and a lot of really, and it just rapid fire, one after another.
It is. That's. I think the dialogue is one of the best things about this film, to be honest. I guess we should talk a little bit about the plot before we get into some of these other items. The film kind of revolves around Katharine Hepburn's character.
Sure.
Katharine Hepburn plays Terry Randall. She's an aspiring actress, comes from a wealthy family. We don't really know the extent of that in the beginning, but she comes from a wealthy family. She wants to leave her family, go be an aspiring actress, and she wants to go out on her own. She makes a lot of speeches about her grandfather. So she comes to this boarding house where it's a boarding house for actresses or aspiring actresses. And there's a whole slew of women living in this boarding house. There's, I don't know how many, but a lot. And it's run by a landlady, and there's also a character that's the maid or the housekeeper.
Yeah.
As well. So she comes into this dynamic of all these women.
And it's kind of a fish out of water story for
Yes.
her because these are all, it's Depression era, these are all
Blue
struggling
collar,
actresses, they're all working very hard. Basically for them, this is it. It's this or nothing.
Right.
And Katharine Hepburn comes in, she has very high ideals, but also she's backed up in that with she has a wealthy family, she has something to fall back on. So there's a lot of resentment.
Right.
From the other characters towards her because she makes those speeches like, hey, just go out there and do it, nose to the grindstone. But she comes from kind of that privileged background where it's like, well, yeah, you can, if this doesn't work out for you, Daddy's going to got your back. We don't have that safety net that you do.
Right. When she first comes in, she winds up sharing a room with Ginger Rogers' character, which her name is Jean Maitland in the film. So she comes in and she has, 4 huge trunks in the room? And Ginger Rogers is pretty much like, well, if we don't have enough room, we could sleep in the trunks.
Yeah, I think their dynamic is great, and it's a funny story because they were both big RKO stars,
Right.
And there was a real life kind of rivalry between the two of them, and it was reflected very much in these characters because Ginger Rogers thought that Katharine Hepburn was a little too haughty and a little too full of herself, and Katharine Hepburn thought Ginger Rogers was a little lowbrow. So, I mean, they bring that directly as characters because that's exactly how the characters are in the film.
Yeah, and there was a battle for top billing in this film. They wanted to bill Ginger Rogers first, actually, and Katharine Hepburn wasn't having it. She was infuriated. She was saying she had been a feature film actress longer than Ginger Rogers, and she thought she deserved the top billing, but 4 of her films prior to this were major flops. So I think that there was a quote from the producer, Pandro S. Berman, said something along the lines of, "You're lucky you're not 7th billed in this film."
Yeah, it's crazy to think there was a time when Katharine Hepburn was considered box office poison, but that's where she was at this point. Things were not going well for her career, and she kind of needed this movie. And she wasn't satisfied with the character. She didn't love it, but she needed a hit, so she was kind of clinging on to anything she can get.
Yeah, and actually they say that because of the success she had in this particular movie, because this went well as opposed to all her other films, this got her the role in Bringing Up Baby.
Okay.
Which then, of course, sort of turned her career around a
Sure.
little bit. Okay, so as far as going on with the plot, there's also this one girl. Again, there's a lot of different rivalries in there.
Yeah.
This Linda Shaw is also rival with Ginger Rogers' character, Jean Maitland. They really spar a lot in this film. This is played by Gail Patrick. She's very good at playing these snooty upper-class girls. Yeah. So this girl, Linda Shaw, is sort of dating a big show producer. He has a nightclub. He owns interest in a nightclub. He has all these shows. He's this important guy, played by Adolphe Menjou, who actually, Pittsburgh connection, born in Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so anyhow, she's dating this fellow, and she's very hoity-toity because of it.
Sure.
And the other girls are kind of, I think, jealous because she gets to go on all these really fancy, rich dinners.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't really have anything. I mean, the boarding house dinners appear to leave something to be desired.
Yeah.
The way they speak of them.
And that was kind of a fun aspect of the movie where there's not a lot of men in this movie. I mean, that's one of the things I was struck by first off the bat. You walk in, and it's all women. They're wearing pants, they're wearing button-up shirts. It's very much a woman-centric kind of story. I don't think you see a man until about 10 minutes in, and he's a janitor. Yeah. There's not a lot of strong male presence in this movie. And these girls go on these dates, and they're kind of like using each other mutually. Like the men are like, oh, let's go meet these pretty girls. But the girls are like, well, if I go out with this guy, I could have a decent dinner, not eat whatever they're serving here tonight. So it's kind of just interesting with that shoes under their foot where you see the women kind of manipulating the men and to get what they want and to get their needs fulfilled. So I enjoyed that about it.
Yeah, one of the suitors, one of the lumberjacks that they keep bringing in, Judith Campfield, Lucille Ball's character, keeps hanging out with these lumberjacks from Seattle, I guess they're from. Yeah. One of those people, an early role, Jack Carson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't recognize
Plays
him.
one of the suitors, yeah. I thought that was interesting. So another aspect of this film that's really interesting is, and I read a little bit about this as well, the Adolphe Menjou character. As you go along in the plot, he winds up meeting Ginger Rogers.
Yes.
And being attracted to her. And remember that there's a big rivalry already between Linda Shaw and Jean Maitland,
Definitely.
Ginger Rogers and Gail Patrick to begin with. And then he starts trying to date Ginger Rogers, and he helps her out by he gets her a gig in his club too. He gets her a dancing gig. And there's a sort of feel of the way things used to be in Hollywood, the casting couch.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, this sexual harassment type thing. You actually get a little bit of that in this film. It's like they're showing you a little bit of this, which I think is really rare in a film in the
Absolutely.
30s.
I barely see that up until, a few years ago. You barely saw that, as in contemporary films. And the fact that they address that pretty directly in this movie, it's spelled out pretty clearly that the Powell character is using these women and kind of like playing them for, his own needs, and he's using them, his position of power to get what he wants from them. And he's called out on it pretty clearly. So to see that almost 90 years ago, pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is like such a great woman starring type film, a very independent woman type film. I think this was the precursor to 1939's The Women. That I don't think there's anybody that says, Stage Door influenced The Women, but I think you can see The Women done by MGM. RKO is a little bit more of a not as prestigious studio.
Definitely.
Kind of did this first, and MGM, I feel like, kind of stole the idea in a way. I mean, it doesn't say for a fact, but it's reminiscent of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I thought of too when I was watching this. And the thing I like about this movie is I think it's, when you see a movie like The Women, feels like it's a little more of a gimmick. Where in this movie, it's really natural, it's really organic. And I like that because I think it's so much better when it's just, okay, it's not about the fact they're all women. It's just they're all women.
They're all women.
I think it's really hard to see that. Barbie came out this weekend. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I saw it. It's a good movie, but there's a very empowering message, but it's
Right.
constantly telling you how empowering it is. And I think it's better when, in any situation, any kind of story like that, where it's better when it just is that thing.
Implied.
Instead of just constantly
Yeah.
telling you, hey, look
Beating
at us.
you over the head with it.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly. I think this movie does such a great job of it's just a bunch of strong, and I mean, they're allowed to be funny, they're allowed to be
Right.
aggressive, they're allowed to be mean.
Right.
There's no judgment from the movie. There's no character in the movie commenting those things, and the movie itself is not commenting that way.
And you know what? I feel like even when they're fighting amongst each other or sparring or bickering, I feel like there is a sense of camaraderie where all the women are
absolutely, yeah.
bonded together.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like they're sisters. You know, like
Sisterhood,
you,
yeah.
you have that family relationship where you're going to battle it out, you're going to fight, you're going to get on each other's nerves, but it comes a day you're all in this together. I think
Right.
you even see that later on with Kay character where
Right.
she loses out a part she wants to Katharine Hepburn, and it's devastating to her. But she realizes that Katharine Hepburn's character also has dreams that she wants to fulfill and kind of supports her. And I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, and the Kay character, I'm glad you bring that up because, again, this was the role that was nominated for the Academy Award in this particular film. Again, Andrea Leeds. And she, throughout the film, is obviously very poor, and she can't seem to get a job. It seems, as it goes through the film, and she's talking about this and that she had a little bit of success,
Yeah.
but somehow she's fallen on hard times, and producers won't see her. She's not able to get jobs. And you see throughout the film that you can see she's not eating. The housekeeper lady will bring her like little plates of food saying, "Oh, this is just something I whipped up. I'm just trying. Would you mind sampling?" You can tell that people are trying to give her food,
Sure.
and so forth. But there's a point when she faints,
Yeah.
and that she's suffering from malnutrition. So she's having a really, really hard time, and she's much more emotionally troubled than all the rest of them. She doesn't really partake in the little jesting talks
Definitely.
or anything like that. She's kind of like just a depressed person. Just
Yeah, and you get to feel, like you said, she's had some success
Right.
where most of the other girls in the house are just starting out in their careers. So I think she's lost that kind of like dreaminess. She knows the reality of what
Right.
it is, and she can see the writing on the wall for herself. The rest of the girls have this hope and this like idealism. She knows where she's at in her career, and she knows where it's going. So I think that's why she's kind of set apart from the rest of the group, because she doesn't have that enthusiasm that a lot of the newcomers do.
but very beloved by the rest of the
Oh,
girls.
absolutely, yeah. And they probably see her as kind of like their aspiration, which is ironic. Like someday we can do what she's done, we can achieve what she's achieved.
Right. Well, and at one point when Katharine Hepburn does take the part she was interested in, I remember she specifically says to somebody, "I did this to another girl. I took
Yeah.
her role." I remember that very strongly. I feel like that's why she's saying, "I understand that this is the business. This is how it
Sure.
goes."
And I think that's kind of a theme throughout the whole movie, even at the very end, like the cycle of how the business works. It's just grinding everybody through.
Right.
And you have your time, and you rise and you fall, and that's going to happen to everybody eventually. And that character, she's not the funniest or the most entertaining character in the movie,
No.
but I think she is the most interesting.
Right.
Because of that, because she has a lot more depth than you see with the rest of them.
Yeah. So the director, Gregory LaCava, he was nominated for the Oscar as well. Unfortunately, nobody won. I didn't check to see what was the winning. There must have been a great film that everybody was against.
Let me look
But
it up.
anyhow, Gregory LaCava, actually, an interesting thing about him is he started out as a cartoonist.
Oh, really?
And then in films during World War I, he actually was an animator.
Okay.
So he started out as a cartoonist, became an animator, and then he started to make comedies and such as My Man Godfrey. And he also did some uncredited directing of his good friend W.C. Fields.
Oh, wow.
Because W.C. Fields would fall out with directors
Yeah.
and they would not get along, and he would come in and just help to direct W.C. Fields kind of on the side, but he wouldn't get credit. So I thought that was pretty interesting about him. Producer, again, nominated for Best Picture. Producer was Pandro S. Berman. Now, he produced a ton of films in the 1930s,
Sure.
including a lot of Katharine Hepburn films, Sylvia Scarlett and Alice Adams. But some of his more well-known films are, he did Father of the Bride.
Okay.
He did Blackboard Jungle. He did Tea and Sympathy and Butterfield 8, just to name a couple.
Okay.
So he was actually a pretty prolific film producer. Music by Roy Webb. He did music for Bringing Up Baby, Notorious, and Out of the Past.
Okay.
Cinematography, Robert DeGrasse. He didn't do a lot of well-known films, but he did do The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer.
Okay.
He did Kitty Foyle, and I specifically wanted to mention this one. He did the film Pittsburgh that starred John Wayne.
Oh,
so,
awesome.
yes, we have yet another
Very
Pittsburgh
cool.
connection here.
And talking about cinematography, I think the movie looks really good. It's very obviously based on a play. You can tell that there's a little bit of staginess to it.
Staginess, yeah.
Most of it takes place at the boarding house, but I think the boarding house looks great. You have those stairways, you have those long hallways. There's a great scene with somebody's coming up the stairs and somebody's walking down the hallway. And just such a great use of that space. I think that's a really nice set they designed for that movie. So I think it really complements the action throughout, especially at the end. There's some scenes at the end where that really comes into play. But I think the movie looks great.
You get a real sense of the chaos in the boarding house, like how chaotic it is. And I also think the cinematography is really good in that later final scenes when Kay is walking up the stairs.
Yeah.
It actually really reminds me, I don't know why I keep drawing a parallel to Olivia de Havilland, but it really reminds me of the scene of Olivia de Havilland walking up the stairs in The Heiress at the end of the film as well.
See, for me, I was thinking Nora Desmond. Those final scenes, for obvious reasons. I think just the staircase and like the mental state at that point was a very like Nora Desmond kind of.
Yeah, and we don't want to give away the ending because it is the ending of this is very, very dramatic.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You probably want to have some tissues.
Yeah, and it kind of turns on a dime because it is up until then it's that
snappy.
You have that snappy dialogue. You have all the little subplots going on at the boarding house. You have the situation with Pow and the kind of love triangle there.
Right.
But then just kind of it does pull the rug out from under you.
Right. Yeah, and it's very suddenly impactful. And Katharine Hepburn does what she does best, and she gives a very moving speech.
Yeah.
And she's well known for doing that sort of thing.
Sure. And I think it's funny in those two. There's a scene where they're all trying to get cast in a play. Katharine Hepburn does get cast, but her character isn't a very good actress.
Yeah, terrible.
And it's crazy to watch her playing a bad actress.
Yes.
And you can tell it's hard for her. She's struggling. Like, have you ever heard the story about The Odd Couple?
No.
You know the scene, The Odd Couple, where Walter Matthau's at the Mets game and he misses the triple play because of Jack Lemmon on the phone? They're playing the Pirates in that scene.
Oh.
And they announce that it's Bill Mazeroski hitting. Originally, it was supposed to be Clemente. But Clemente couldn't not beat out the throw to first. He couldn't
he was
fake
too fast.
running slow enough. So they had to put Mazeroski in. And it reminded me of that because, like, Katharine Hepburn trying to play a bad actress.
Yes.
It's almost like she's doing a bad job because she doesn't know how to be a bad actress. Yeah.
Although I will say, I think Katharine Hepburn is great. Her early career a little more affected. Her acting, a little more stagey, I would say. When I compare her to roles like Lion in Winter, so much better, so much more natural of an actress at that point. But this is very early, and that's the way they acted in the 30s.
I
very
think
effective.
Even you see that a little bit in Bringing Up Baby, but I think that's to her advantage. A lot of times I don't like that kind of like put on that like middle Atlantic accent and everything, but it seems to just come natural to her. Like, it seems like that's who she is. You don't get the feeling that she's faking it like a lot of them are. But definitely you see her kind of mellow out like mid-career, like Lion in Winter, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, things like that. You definitely see a little more, maybe humanity, a little more emotion behind it. But she was always fantastic.
Yeah. Speaking of that kind of affected acting of the 30s, I always think about Norma Shearer. So affected to me. When I watch her, I'm just like, oh. And there's another parallel to The Women.
Yeah.
The plot, it pretty much goes on, as we said. The girls are doing different things, trying to get roles, dealing with this wolf, I guess is the term back then, Adolphe Menjou. And actually, Adolphe Menjou, an interesting story about him and Katharine Hepburn, hated each other.
Oh, really?
Hated each other. They were polar opposites politically. And Katharine was very big politically, and so was he.
Yeah.
Polar opposites. And Adolphe Menjou, unfortunately, his politicalness actually wound up hurting him because he did wind up being a friendly witness for the House Un-American Activities Committee and really ruined his reputation in acting. And it hurt him, and when that came out, and he had trouble getting parts.
Sure. Yeah, you don't see him much after a certain time,
Not much after the 50s.
Yeah.
But he did play a role in Pollyanna.
Just so I did look it up.
Oh, good.
So
we hate not having a cliffhanger and not knowing.
1937 Best Picture was The Life of Emile Zola.
Oh, well, Paul Muni, come on.
And the Best Director was Leo McCarey for The Awful Truth.
Well, The Awful Truth is a very good movie.
Yeah, sure.
But you can't argue about Paul Muni.
No.
I hope Paul Muni won Best Actor, but
I think he did.
Well, Paul Muni is amazing. We should have a whole show on Paul Muni. One of my favorites. I love him.
Sure.
So, anything else you want to say about this particular film?
No. I just really think it wasn't what I expected. With Ginger Rogers, we'll talk about that. I haven't seen a ton of Ginger Rogers movies. I'm not too familiar with her work. But obviously, I've always associated her with Dancing with Fred Astaire. And her acting in this is pretty solid.
Yeah.
She holds her own against Katharine Hepburn. I think she does a really good job. And the fact that she doesn't do a lot of dancing. I think there's one scene of them practicing, and there's one quick scene in the nightclub. And I don't know if she got shut down, but to me that says that kind of a lack of ego. A lot of times you get a dancer or a singer in a movie, well, I want to sing, I want to dance. And you don't see that in this. It's just really focusing on her acting. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe at this point she's trying to not be too typecast as a dancer, because that can happen. So Ann Miller, actually almost as good a dancer as Ginger Rogers. She's also a dancer.
Yeah, she doesn't get to do much here. Again, there's not much dance in the movie at all, but what she does, like I said, she's, again, going toe-to-toe with Ginger Rogers. So
yeah, and she was a fantastic dancer, and she did a lot of dancing throughout her career. I think a couple years later, she would wind up making You Can't Take It With You.
Okay.
Which great
that
Frank
is her.
Capra
Yeah, that's
movie.
right. Yeah,
and
yeah,
she,
sure.
She
Okay.
she actually does a sort of thing like Katharine Hepburn had to do, where she has to pretend to be a bad dancer in that particular film. And I think that was in 39.
Can't Take It With You, I think it was 38. I think it was a year after this.
So she was 14 in this film.
She's only 15 there. Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that is.
She just looks like...
Yeah. Now, did she just lie about her age, or did
they said that when she was trying to get this role, she did lie about her age. I don't know. I guess they weren't too particular about getting documentation.
I guess not.
Back then, I don't know. But yeah, apparently she did lie about her age. Another thing I wanted to mention is Eve Arden. She plays Eve.
Yeah. So good.
Easy to remember.
She was the highlights for me.
She's very cynical. Yeah. I'm sure you noticed that she has a cat the entire film. Like literally the whole film, she's holding this cat. So apparently she actually just happened to see this cat on the RKO lot, and she kind of liked this cat. This was before they were even in production, and since she had been spending all this time with the cat, they just made it a prop for her in this film. She
did the Marlon Brando.
She just brought the cat on.
I couldn't even tell if that cat was alive, to be honest. It was just laying on her shoulders. I thought it was maybe stuffed or something.
She was responsible for the stardom of this cat. Eve Arden, bringing him onto the film.
No, but of course it took me a while to place her, but I realized I know her as the principal from Grease. Many years later, that's the connection. I mean, I was sitting, I'm like, who is this? If I looked up, like, okay, and you could see it. I mean, obviously much younger, but she has that very distinct look to her, and just so funny, like her timing, her voice. She has some of my favorite moments in the movie.
She's very witty, witty dialogue in this movie. That happens to me all the time too when I'm watching films. Where have I seen this person before? Then you got to get on the IMDb.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Anyhow, is there anything else that you think that people would want to know about this particular film? Obviously, we would definitely recommend.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's a great showcase for a lot of talent that maybe at that point weren't that well known with some of the more supporting cast, but I mean, great Katharine Hepburn role, Ginger Rogers. And yeah, like I said, you'll laugh, you'll cry. It's one of those, it's definitely one of those movies. I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Should we do a star ranking for this film? How many stars do we want to give this film?
Are we doing 3 or are we doing out of 4 out of 5? How do you want to do it?
We'll do out of 5 stars.
Okay.
Out of 5 stars being obviously the greatest film ever made. David Lean.
Well, you go first. What are you going to give it?
I would give this 3.5.
That's where I go. I go 3.5. Yeah.
I mean, not the greatest film ever.
No.
But very good, very enjoyable, very entertaining.
Yeah.
A nice pioneering movie, especially a nice empowering women movie.
Yeah.
Which obviously is important to me.
Sure,
I think it's for 1937. I mean, I don't think you can beat it. The quality for 1937, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really good. And I think it's just a really good one of those Sunday afternoon movies to watch, just put on.
Absolutely.
And
it's not a very long movie, so you're not sitting on the couch for 3.5
it's 90
hours.
minutes, so But it takes you a little bit of a roller coaster ride. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Yeah, 100%. So Kirk, I think that pretty much wraps it up for Stage Door.
All
and
right.
I hope you will join us next time when we talk more classic films here at Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy and Kirk Classic Film Review.
All right, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Silver Screen Time Machine.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a comment and a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Intro music composed by Heidi Engel.
Outro music composed by Maximus Monk.
Artwork by Tyler Birch.
Produced and edited by Wendy Whittick and Kirk Kolkowski.
Recorded at PCTV Studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.